I'm John Opdycke. I'm very excited and pleased to be sharing hosting duties today with my longtime friend and colleague, Cathy Stewart. Cathy is the founder of the Politics for the People book club and a vice president at Independent Voting. And she and I have worked together on many, many different campaigns, schemes, initiatives going back 25 years. We built the New York City Independence Party, the National Reform Party together. We helped get Mike Bloomberg elected and reelected 3 times. And in fact, we actually shared an office together at Independent Voting for 15 years, an office that was not meant for 2 people. It was very small. And during those 15 years, basically every single phone conversation either one of us had, the other one listened to. So I'm really excited to be doing this together with you, Cathy, and thrilled to have this chance to talk with Andrew Yang about his new book, Forward, and his new political venture, the Forward Party. So take us away, Cathy.
Thanks, John, and welcome, Andrew. Thank you for joining us today. This is the first joint Zoom call sponsored by Open Primaries and the Politics for the People book club. And we're joined today by scores of Open Primaries activists, funders, and leaders, as well as Politics for the People book club members who come from the Independent Voting Network and the People Network and are activists and leaders on the ground who over the last decade or so have had some really wonderful in-depth conversations with some of the most interesting and engaged political authors in the country. So you're in good company, Andrew, and we're really excited for today's dialogue. We're going to kick off our discussion with a few questions and then open it up to our audience. If you in the audience have a question, stick it in the chat now with your name and state. But before we dive into our dialogue, we wanted to take a look at a quick video clip from a CBS affiliate.
Is the Forward Party, as you envision it, a true third party, as we've seen in the past? Or is it more a set of principles for now that people of, say, other parties would support? How exactly would that work?
The Forward Party is an inclusive, popular movement you can join as a registered Democrat, Independent, Republican, and our main mission is just to fix the incentives so that our government will actually listen to us and work for us as opposed to who it's working for right now, which is a set of party insiders. So we can go to states around the country, as they already did in Alaska, and shift to open primaries and ranked choice voting where anyone can run from any party. There is no spoiler effect. You can vote for whomever you like and no one can complain to you that you're messing it up for one side or the other. Real independent parties will emerge. The Forward Party is a movement that's going to enable our democracy to actually stand the test of time. Because this duopoly, again, it's creaking, it's cracking, it's 150 years old, and it's not working at all, but it doesn't know how to reform itself. So that's what the Forward Party is designed to change. It's a movement that can include people of any political alignment that just want the country to work better.
That's a great clip. Welcome, Andrew. Thanks for taking some time to talk to us.
Hey, John, great to be here. That was a good clip. Problem solved.
Yeah, right. We can end now. Cathy and I are just going to ask a few questions, Andrew, and then we're going to open it up for the questions which are already coming in from our participants today. So I want to ask you something that kind of builds off this clip, which is that the Forward Party, you have a set of principles, not a traditional party platform. Your principles are ranked choice voting and open primaries, human-centered capitalism, effective governance, a fair and fact-based government, universal basic income, and grace and tolerance. And that's very unusual. I don't know if you even know how unusual that is. Most parties, including third parties, are all about ideology and kind of a fixed party platform. And I wanted to ask, how did you get there? How did you decide to focus on principles and values, not on ideology?
Thanks, John. It was while I was researching and writing my book, forward where I was trying to identify and diagnose the biggest problems with the duopoly as it currently works. And what I've realized is that our way of life is deteriorating. We're 28th in the world, and in such basic measurements as infant mortality or public education or clean drinking water. And we're not having that conversation. It's not like the Democratic Republican Party is not like, hey, who's doing a better job with clean drinking water? Who's doing a better job with that is activating, unfortunately, this tribal clash. And so my goal was to identify a set of principles that could help solve the problems that we see around us without activating people ideologically in one way or another. I think most people have a sense of where I am on a lot of issues, but when I got asked questions in the field, a lot of the time I was uncomfortable answering because they would be pressing on an issue that I may think a certain thing about. And I know by my saying, hey, I feel this way about, let's call it gun rights or whatever it is, I know it's a very, very inflammatory, divisive issue that's going to immediately shut off, I don't know, 35, 40% of Americans, depending upon what the issue is. And that issue is tangential to anything that we're, one, going to be able to actually legislate in the immediate term, but two, it wouldn't be very high on my list of priorities.
Right.
And so the danger you have if you start a third party is like, well, let's go down the line and figure out a bunch of policies that are going to wind up separating people and distracting us from what I think is like the core problem. And the core problem is that we have this artificial duopoly. Neither party is truly responsive to the people because they don't have to be. There's no true competition in 90% of the country. Tens of millions of Americans. And this is the thing I say to folks is like, look, a lot of people are checked out on politics because they know their vote doesn't matter. And you know what? They're correct. In 90% of the country, the minority party has absolutely no power on what the heck is going to happen in their community. So one of the massive upgrades of open primaries would be at least you'd have to listen to the person who's in the minority party. Like they may not get their way, but at least that's a conversation to be had. Whereas right now, that person's point of view is completely marginalized. So this is a long-winded way of saying, John, we tried to identify principles that could help solve the country's problems and move us forward without taking a stance on a whole range of issues that different people have different points of view on.
Got it.
Andrew, in your book, which I really so enjoyed, you seem very sensitive to the issue of voter mobility. And by that, I mean voters having more options, more choices, and more capacity to impact. So what I mean by that is, so you designed the Forward Party so that people can join without having to change their voter registration. And one of the core reforms, which you just talked about, is open and nonpartisan primaries, which of course gives voters a great deal more mobility and options. So I wanted to ask you if you could talk more about this concept of voter mobility and how you think about it and what it means to you.
The conversation right now in the country is very frustrating because you have Democrats talking about Republican restrictions on the right to vote, but you don't hear any Democrats talking about the most fundamental restriction on the right to vote, which is, hey, you know, if you're not a registered Democrat, you can't participate in these closed party primaries, which are the rule in most states around the country. And that to me is a more fundamental abridgment of people's ability to vote than anything else that's being discussed. So that should be our focus, is saying to folks, look, you should be able to vote regardless of your party affiliation. You shouldn't have to jump through hoops. To the extent that the Forward Party is going to have a process, it's going to be very easy to participate. And that's what the people should demand, in my view, especially because these parties are so made up. The Democratic and Republican Party completely fabricated, nothing in the Constitution about either of them. The founders would be horrified that we've let this set of structures limp along for as long as we already have. I actually had not heard it characterized as voter mobility, Cathy. To me, it's something around like voter power, voter freedom. I can't tell you how many people came to me during the New York mayoral election and said, "Hey, I want to support you. Like how do I do that?" And I'd ask them, "Are you a registered Democrat?" And they would say no, and I'd be like, "Well, you need to have registered 4 months ahead of the primary." So if I'm having this conversation with someone in March, April, May, June, which I did many, many times, I had to tell them they're out of luck. And that's the wrong message. So I'd love for there to be real pressure on the Democrats who generally like claim to be the champions of this sort of thing. But when push comes to shove, that they're very much like a power center and establishment that does not like true competition.
Yeah, very well said. I also love this point you're making about the parties being made up. I think so often Americans think that they actually are, many people are surprised to learn that the parties aren't even mentioned in the Constitution. So I think that's an important point, a lot of which flows from. Thanks for that answer, Andrew.
No problem, Cathy. You know, one of the fascinating things about this too, and this is going to make a very powerful suggestion to some people, which, you know, it's like shrug. To the extent there's a weakness in the system, it's at the presidential level, it's at the national level. At a local level, it's harder because there's less oxygen, less in the way of resources, no press. Like it's hard for you to get your name out and the rest of it. At a national level, it's almost harder for the duopoly to suppress someone. You know, that I just wanted to plant that seed for people that to the extent that there are big changes to be had, I think that they may occur through that kind of path or mechanism.
That's fascinating because in some ways that's such a flip on the way things are supposed to be, like local, congressional, like that's where there's supposed to be the most kind of fluidity and opportunities. And that when you get to the Senate and president, that's supposed to be a little more control, but it's actually kind of on its head right now. I think that's a very good observation. A question, Andrew, about something that drives me a little nuts, which is how the political experts in this country talk about independent voters. There's this way that the pundits, the kind of beltway prognosticators, they respond to the fact that 45% of Americans now identify as independent voters as a non-event. In fact, they say there really aren't any independents. They're Democrats light, Republicans light. And I wanted to just get your thoughts on this. Is this, as the experts say, much ado about nothing, or is the fact that the largest group of voters in the country don't want to associate with either the Democrats and Republicans, is that significant? Is that important?
Yeah, John, the number that you're citing is that 7% of voters have demonstrated a propensity to vote on either side, switch parties, which is much lower, obviously, than the 44% who self-identify as independents or the 50%. That's the analysis, which is like, hey, do independents really exist? And the answer is that I think independents do exist abundantly if there are actual choices that appeal to independents. It's one reason why most states have actually made it illegal to have a party that's called independent because they know that that party would probably do very well.
Right.
And so it's easy to say, well, there are no independents if there are only two choices and you're stuck with one or the other, in part because a lot of independents do lean one way or the other, but if they were presented with an option, I think they would very, very quickly choose that option over one of the major parties. And you can see this in the numbers. This is even more true for young people. Young people have an allergy to both of the major parties. I think the last thing I saw is that like 70% of young people don't want either of the two parties. And so the loyalty to the Democrats and the Republicans is illusory. And if we had a real viable third party choice, I think that is demonstrated very quickly.
Thanks.
Andrew, in reading Forward and in hearing you talk around the country about the Forward Party, I've been so struck by the following, that you're trying to build a tool to restructure American democracy while simultaneously transforming how we relate to one another. So combining the need for reform in terms of the structure and the rules of the game, while building human compassion, understanding, connection, and as you put it in the principles of the Forward Party, grace and tolerance. And that to me is a very, very, very rich juxtaposition. And I wondered how you think about those two things together.
One of the lessons that I try to draw in my book is a lesson that the country is going to learn in catastrophic fashion over the next number of months, which is that all politics are tribal. And in that instance, you want more than two tribes. You don't want two warring tribes that are just going to clash and clash. So if you're trying to introduce a different dynamic that allows more tribes to flourish, you are de facto starting your own tribe. Now, there are people that have supported open primaries for a long time, and I applaud you, because open primaries is a phenomenal organization and cause. And if you've met with each other, you've probably picked up on the fact that you have some stuff in common. I have a feeling that the folks who support open primaries just naturally get along and like each other and whatnot. So Cathy, when I was trying to identify a way to galvanize energy around this third party, I was reflecting on what it would mean to have a unifying political movement that combats polarization. And a lot of it is around the fact that we should not be demonizing each other or allow ourselves to be pitted against each other as enemies. As someone who ran for president, I met with thousands of Americans in different circumstances, and 99% of them were lovely. But if you were to try and see that through media or social media lens, then you would think that we'd get there and throw the gloves down and, spit at each other and do all sorts of stuff, which does not happen in real life. so that's the message where the Forward Party wants to let us see each other as human beings and strip away these false media means of division. And so we try to encapsulate that in the principle of grace and tolerance.
Yeah, I think that's so important. My experience over the years has been that as you build something together, right, you come to see the other in very new and different ways, way beyond all the ways the media tells us we can't come together. We are at odds with one another. So I really applaud that, the approach that you're taking there.
Well, thanks. I was trying to identify what motivates me personally. And this was another tough lesson that I try and draw in the book, which is that you imagine you're standing up for ideas or policies, but then you yourself end up being the product if you're a candidate. And so then I had to adapt to that. And happily, there were certain things about me that tied in well with my campaign. And if we're going to start a movement, people often want to identify with a human being. And so you need to try and make that easy for folks.
Absolutely.
All right, the questions are flooding in, and we only have an hour, so we want to start bringing in some other voices right away. I want to turn it over to Katie Fahey in Michigan. Katie Fahey, a hero of redistricting reform in Michigan, has a question. Well, ask your question, Katie. Go ahead.
Okay, sure. Hey, thank you. Glad to see everybody today. Andrew, I loved in your book seeing that you support concepts like civic juries and deliberative polling. In Michigan, to end gerrymandering, we actually applied similar concepts so that we could actually have nonpartisan districts, which we just got for the very first time, which is super exciting. I've also been working with Larry Lessig on a project called deliberations.us that focuses on being able to break down policy topics and have people hear the pros and cons and be able to make decisions together about what they see as a good solution or way to improve or not improve a system. So I was just wondering if you could help explain kind of like why you like that concept so much, and if you also see opportunities that of where deliberative democracy can be applied in other contexts and what that might mean for our democracy if we are able to make more of our democracy operate in that way.
Oh, thank you for your leadership and work, Katie. And say hey to Larry for me.
Will do.
So there are a number of people that I owe a great debt to in terms of understanding some of these issues, and Lawrence Lessig is one of them. And in his book, They Don't Represent Us, which is a pretty good title, it sums it up pretty well. He talked about different remedies and approaches that other societies have adopted. And I thought civic juries would be something that the American people would understand immediately, which is just you line up a group of representative Americans and ask them to deliberate on a set of issues after they get information. You have a before and after. And one reason why I liked civic juries so much is that they'd have this moral authority that everyone would immediately sense, but also it'd be very easy for press to cover. They could just go and say, hey, here's what the civic jury said, and here's what they want to do. Then you'd immediately see an enormous contrast between what the civic jury wants to do and what Congress wants to do. And you'd be like, hey, what's going on there? So this to me would be another way to put pressure on our legislators to be responsive and do the right thing. Congratulations on working on, is it deliberate.us?
Yeah, deliberations.us, yep.
Deliberations.us, where I talked to Larry about this, where he's just going to go ahead and set up the civic juries and then see what people think about things. And I think it should be awesome and powerful. So, I'll do my best to amplify as soon as you guys have stuff.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Katie. Thank you, Andrew, for that. We're going to, I'm actually going to ask two folks to ask both their questions together because they're on very similar topics about the African-American community. So we're going to hear from Jarrell Corley from Illinois and Dr. Jesse Fields from New York. And you'll both ask your questions, and Andrew, you can talk to them both.
Who wants to go first?
Jarrell should, Jarrell, why don't you go first?
Okay.
You said your name first, so go ahead.
Sounds good, sounds good. Half of young people like me are now registered independent, including growing numbers of young people of color. Oh, also, Andrew, thanks for your time and coming on to the call today. I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Jarrell.
We're, people like myself, we're tired of both major parties, but there's the perception we'll just eventually fall in line with the Democratic Party anyway, considering that, we're young and specifically we're African-American. And how do you and the Forward Party plan to reach out to our specific demographic, young African-Americans?
Maybe I should go. My question is related to what Jarrell just asked. Thank you, Jarrell. Thank you, Andrew, for being here. And I really enjoyed your book very much. I wanted to, one of the things I like about the Forward Party is that it's open. Anybody can join. So it's one way of bringing people together, and kind of related to what you've said in terms of the Democratic Party and what Jarrell said, you would think that the Democratic Party would be supporting open primaries and giving everybody the right to vote, but they're not. As a party, they're not. And so my question was also about particularly organizing in the Black community and in poor neighborhoods and in other communities of color. It's been the case that the Democratic Party has taken the Black community for granted in many ways. And I think the allegiance, the kind of allegiance and traditional voting of the Black community with the Democratic Party being kind of mostly within the Democratic Party, although as Jarrell said, that's changing. However, that dynamic, I think, has restricted the potential of the Black community leading the entire country and really fundamentally transforming our political process. Because we see that although it's been allied mostly with the Democratic Party, social conditions for the Black community, communities of color, and poor communities have not advanced. And so I wanted to ask one about the Forward Party directly reaching out in communities of color with structural political reform, equal voting rights, opening the primaries, these things which are fundamental and resonate. Issues of democracy and equal voting rights resonate in communities of color, as I'm sure you know. So I wanted you to talk about that direct outreach. Thanks for being here.
Jarrell and Jesse, thank you so much. Thank you for the questions and thank you for being here. I'm going to put an email address in the chat, which is Matt Shinner's the head of the Forward Party, because we have a massive opportunity with the Black community and obligation, and I want to take full advantage of it, and we need your help. So when you say, Jarrell, like, hey, how are we going to reach young Black voters who right now feel like the Democratic Party is the only game in town? We have a huge opportunity to introduce real competition. And this is one of the problems with the duopoly, is that if you're the duopoly, I'm just going to speak for Asians for fun. Not that I'm, I can't speak for all Asians, but I can speak for myself. So Asians were traditionally apolitical and then split. And then now Democrats are like, well, what are you going to do? Vote for the racists who, like run around? Because like you're like, that they can take you for granted because they just look up and say that the other party is worse than we are where your community is concerned. Meanwhile, the structural conditions don't really change. So if you have the Forward Party that is active in Black communities, and Black communities can say, look, nothing's happening here, so we're going to support the Forward Party, then maybe the pressure is on the Democratic Party to be like, hey, we actually have to deliver something real and tangible, not just window dressing, not just optics. Like, we need to actually make someone's neighborhood better, someone's school better, like do something real to address issues in Black community. I would be thrilled if that was one of the values of the Forward Party, is to hold the Democratic Party's feet to the fire where the Black community is concerned. And I do think that there's a growing interest and appetite in the Black community because they can sense that this is not working, that right. The duopoly is not serving their interest. So please, we would love your help. And I would be the first to say, and I think someone noted in the chat too, that we have a lot of work to do to reach out to the Black community in terms of the open primaries movement, the Forward Party, like all of this stuff. I'm going to give my perception of this, which is one reason I'm so grateful to you for really everyone for being here today. So politics is something of a luxury. Like people who really have their backs against it and are just like, just like you can't get your head up to start thinking about things you could do to, like make something better. And then to the extent that people get invested in open primaries, like you have to be almost a step removed where there's like the tribal war. So there are people who are just trying to get through the day. And then there are people who put their heads up and say, okay, let me participate in politics, which would typically be, join one side or the other. And then this is like, not to flatter you all or whatever, but this is like the next level. This is like seeing that the structures aren't working and like trying to change it. So there's a massive opportunity for the Black community that we are not even scratching the surface of. And I would love, love, love your help in changing it. Jarrell, also, I want to say we're going to try and reach people not through conventional political media because, like young people are like, on TikTok and doing a bunch of things that that aren't the typical channels. So we need to invest in that too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
There is a big opportunity here, though. If we package this right and we're actually like, talking to young people and Black people and different people in different ways, like I think we can move mountains.
I think it's so important too, because, Jesse said this, Andrew, there's, in our work around the country, there is this abandonment in cities, all over the country. It's like, oh, these are inner cities. They just vote Democratic. It doesn't matter if they're one party city. Who cares? They're going to vote Democratic, move on. And that lack of competition, that lack of fighting for people's votes and representing them well is so corrosive and negative. So I'm really glad you're concerned about that. Have a question from Donna Sauerberger in Maryland about, do we even need a third party? Go ahead, Donna.
Well, thank you. I I really worry about parties in general. And, they can start out with the best of intentions, but it's gotten to the point where the parties have more interest in issues that will keep them in power than in meeting the needs of the constituents. And I kind of answered my own question later because I realized it seems, let me ask, are you setting up, it sounds like you're not setting up a party, but an organization that promotes, structure and different issues. And so I'd like to know, first of all, if that's the case, it would be less confusing if you would call it an organization rather than a party. But also, am I right that it's not really a party that will eventually try to keep its power more importantly than meeting the needs of people?
Donna, I tell a joke I shouldn't, but it's like I look forward to the days when people are trying to buy and corrupt us because I believe that we actually won races and have some power and whatnot. So right now the Forward Party is technically a PAC, Political Action Committee, because it turns out you cannot start a political party in the United States day one. Now, in order to become a political party, you need to have a bunch of requirements met through the FEC, like multiple state chapters, supporting candidates, national headquarters, national convention. And so after you fulfill these requirements, then you can be approved as a political party. So right now we're a PAC that we hope to become a party in the next, let's call like 12 to 15 months, because we want to do all the things I just listed. It's going to be good fun. So we are going to be supporting candidates and doing things, but most of the candidates we support will be running as Democrats or Republicans, because that's just the reality in the vast majority of races. And so if there is a Democrat or Republican who's running in a race and they say, you know what, we should be for open primaries, everyone should have a say, which, by the way, just about anyone in the minority party in a district should be for, because the minority party is traditionally completely shut out. So they should be like, hey, we should have open primaries. Then the Forward Party can get behind them. They don't need to be running as a Forward Party member, especially because that would be deeply impractical and unhelpful in the vast majority of races. So I hope that clarifies our nature. But I said in that news clip, we're a popular movement, an inclusive popular movement, people that just want things to work better.
Thanks, Andrew.
So
Andrew,
convention coming, good fun. We've got a few locations in the offing.
When are you doing your convention?
So it's going to be, in all likelihood, late this year. And we're looking at, drum roll, you can have some votes in the chat, because I'm curious. So some of the locations that have been proposed to us are Las Vegas, Austin, Phoenix. Those are three of the locations that are, so I don't know if anyone has any strong feelings about any of those.
Oh, let's see what our audience has to say about those three.
Yeah, let's see if we can do a little micro poll.
We'll do a little micro polling there. Everybody weigh in. And let's go to Attorney Harry Kresge from New York, who has a question about some of the reactions you've been getting since you launched the Forward Party. Harry?
Hi, good afternoon. Andrew, there's a Jewish word for what you're doing, chutzpah. And I was wondering what kind of pressure or pushback you're getting having stepped forward in the way in which you have.
Well, thanks, Harry. I've got nothing but roses and accolades. No, I'm kidding. The strange thing is that people have reacted as if I'm going to somehow like destroy the Democratic Party, or that I'm deeply self-aggrandizing. And the second one made me laugh, because no one who goes into this space is doing it for their own like economic, well-being or the rest of it. I mean, it's a bit of a political wilderness, like our challenge is to build the civilization in the wilderness. But people on the Democratic side are very, very knee-jerk and reactive to someone. And I guess on some level I understand it because I was a Democrat and I left the party, and so maybe that's a natural dynamic. The predominant response I've gotten, Harry, has just been curiosity and intrigue, which is like, is this possible? Can this happen? Can this work? Can Yang do something that other people believe is impossible, which is start a viable third party in the United States of America? I'm 100% sure that that there's going to be some kind of transformation of the duopoly in the coming months. That's either going to be benign, like the one that we're trying to make happen here in this call, or a catastrophic one. Like those are the two choices. Like if you hit the fast forward button, do we really think that the duopoly is functioning as it is right now 32 years from now? Like, does anyone really want to take that bet? Especially given some of the trends that Jarrell and other people have noted on this call, where you're just like, this is not going well. So we either have to make some positive changes, or we're going to see the very negative version of this. But I appreciate everyone who's gone into this space, Harry, because you get you get all sorts of strange motivations pushed onto you. You know what I mean? Like, to me, this is an obvious case for reform, but partisans have their own lens, and it's one thing that actually fueled me to want to work even harder to make this transformation, because we need to free people of this tribal warfare framework that so many people are operating in.
Thanks
Andrew,
so much.
we have some questions from some young activists. Dariel Cruz in Florida. Dariel's one of the co-founders of Students for Open Primaries, and Darius Holt from Maryland. They'd like your advice on what it means to be a young activist in the United States of America. So why don't the two of you take off your mute at the same time and ask your questions and talk to Andrew.
Yeah. Hey, Andrew. I'm Dariel. I'm 17. I'm from Orlando, Florida. A high school senior. I've been working with Open Primaries for the past 2 years. It's an incredible thing to get involved in. You yourself have popular youth following, especially with the Yang Gang, and your people following you so far. How do we go about making the impact of Open Primaries on the 42% of Gen Zers, including those in your following that identify as independents, who have been voting, or people like me who will be voting for the first time in the next midterm, more appealing?
And Darius, you want to add to that?
For me is, I would like to know is what I would like to start to do into my question on how to get involved in being an activist for advocating for open primaries in my home state of Maryland, for example, or get involved in politics, but don't really know how to, where to start really for a person like me who's 25 years old, who's really want to get involved, seeing all the commotion going on in Washington over the past 4 to 5 years and wanting to get involved, but doesn't really know how to start.
Oh, thank you, Darius and Dariel. I think your questions are related. So I'll start with Darius, where people who can help a campaign are worth their weight in gold. And as someone who's run pretty significant campaigns, it's still true at every level. Like, Darius, if you had, for example, a congressional candidate, either in Maryland or someplace else, that was for, let's say, open primaries and some other things you were excited about, like you liked this person, and you became a volunteer for them, you could do a whole lot, because there aren't that many people who do that, frankly. Like at a congressional race, you'd have a handful of people who show up to volunteer. And so if you were to contribute, you'd get a lot of responsibility pretty quickly. That some of those responsibilities would be like, just canvassing and reaching out to people. But sometimes things that are very, very unexpected. And I saw that all the time on my teams. So try and find a campaign or candidate that you like. And if you want to just get in touch with the Forward Party, we can hopefully find someone that you get excited about. because we need you. We need you to roll your sleeves up and also find the right kind of fit and opportunity. Daryl, I love what you're doing, where you're not even voting age and you're trying to make this stuff happen. I think Students for Open Primaries is really exciting, in large part because young people are sick and tired of the parties. They don't understand what their options are. And if they understood that we could make it so that they could vote for different types of candidates and dislodge what they see as an ineffective establishment, then you could have thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who are excited about open primaries on campuses around the country. And we'd absolutely love your help in making that happen. So, I think I've been in touch with your social media person. It might be you, Daryl, given the nature of things. But yeah, I'm going to do what I can to help make Students for Open Primaries like a mainstay on campuses.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And it is me.
I like your video too, Daryl. It's me too. So, it's just yeah, keep it up.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks for those questions, guys. We're now going to go to Jessica Forcell, I think it is, in Pennsylvania, who's asking a question and wants to talk with you, Andrew, about the slow road that is reform and whether there's a faster route. Jessica?
Okay, thank you so much, Kathy. Especially my heating is out today, so I'm bundled up in layers of Sherpa, so I did not expect any airtime. But, I've thought a lot about how we can bring more competition into our democracy. I'm a big fan of Catherine Gale and Porter's work. And I've also been involved in redistricting reform in my state of Pennsylvania for probably 6 years. And I found this is an incredibly slow road to walk down, right? Kind of going issue by issue with intransigent state legislatures. And I'm shout out to Kitty Fahey as well, who did an amazing job in Michigan. But I've always kind of wondered, is there any way to speed up and disrupt the duopoly more quickly from a more top-down versus bottom-up approach, right? And kind of trigger some kind of secession, right? Which we know there's a desire for. So that's my main question. Thank you so much for taking it.
Oh, thank you, Jessica. I also am a huge fan of Catherine Gale and Michael Porter's work. I think that their ballot initiatives around the country are some of the most important things going on in this year, 22. Their approach requires vast resources, which I'm for. So I might as well walk you all through at least some of my early experiences in this space. Democracy reform as a philanthropic category gets around $150 million a year, which I'm going to say is a very, very low amount given the amount that goes to each party, which is, let's call it like 8 billion or so, or any other philanthropy that you can name. So if you are for, let's say, climate change, amelioration, would that work better if you had a democracy that worked better? Sure. So, in a way, it's like if you're going to put $1 billion into climate change, you'd probably spend like 200 million of that in democracy reform. It would be rational to me. So you all are in this very select vanguard of people who figured out that these are the issues. And I think that the interest in this is going to shoot up over the next number of weeks and months. I think that 150 million is going to go up. But we need to attack this at the grassroots level, at the state and congressional level. These ballot initiatives, enormous. And to your point, maybe like from the top down, and I referenced earlier that I think the weakness in the system is the presidential or the national. So there could be an opportunity to pick up a lot of energy nationally over the next, 36 months or so. But I think there's going to be a huge level of interest and investment in this area. And the people here, you should, like folks like John, you've been in the space for a long time. Like, I think it's about to get hot. I think it's about to get sexy. You know what I mean? Like, you're making this kind of like wonky case and everyone's like, yeah, I don't understand, blah, blah, blah. Like, I think that people are going to understand more and more.
Well, also, Andrew, the thing you said just a few minutes ago about the duopoly is going to go under, it's going to undergo a significant change in the next 30 years. Is that going to be positive or is that going to be negative? Is it going to self-destruct or are we going to build something new? I think we just have to stay in the game. We have to be moving and proposing and working so that as that larger process unfolds, and it's not as fast enough for any of us, that we're there to help shape it in the most positive direction forward. That's how I think about it. All right. JP Otto wants to ask you 12 different questions. So I'm just going to turn it over to JP to ask your questions. Go ahead.
Outstanding, outstanding book there, Andrew. Thanks for doing what you did. In one part of it, you said that
Where are you from, JP? Where are you?
South Carolina now. I'm awaiting the gerrymandering here in district that Nancy Mace, a first-term Congresswoman, Republican, and they're going to protect her district really well because it was combative and up until now. But this is a majority red state, and he's been here many times. Andrew, you've been here, and you know what it's like. So thanks again. I mean, this is important stuff. But don't you think if we roll out open primaries and RCV together, you're going to end up having no independents on the ballot in the November general election? Can't we separate the two and maybe just go for RCV now?
I think we have to be opportunistic, JP. I think just getting RCV is an improvement. I think that getting RCV and open primaries together is better, frankly. And even if you have a Republican or Democrat get elected, if they're all of a sudden answering to the vast majority of South Carolinians or a vast majority of people in the district, that's an improvement. So I see different paths to improvement. One path is getting a third party and more parties and different people from different backgrounds in. But another is you have the same people in that are in now. It's just they actually do a better job. And I would prefer the former, to your point, JP. I would love it if there were like more parties and like more points of view. But if the people in office have better incentives, like that could be an enormous difference maker.
Can you answer one more thing in your book? You challenged the Obamacare rollout and the CDC treatment of the COVID. So why is it that you give the IRS so much love in thinking that they're going to be able to fix tax collection? Help me with that one.
Well, you know, in a way I don't, JP, but, you know, because like I see that they're, you know, like I suggest that if you had private actors doing it, they'd probably do a much more effective, efficient job. But I do think most Americans' taxes are simple enough where we shouldn't be wasting anyone's time with them. You know, like you can have something that essentially just auto fills or auto files, and then you can check it. And if you're like a lot of Americans, you'll just be like looks more or less right. Maybe you get an extra deduction or two. So that's where I am on it. But you're not wrong. Like there are real limitations on our bureaucracies.
And just final point on that is there has been a fair tax been presented in Congress for years. 50 co-sponsors have been signed on at some point. That basically eliminates income tax. So I was glad to see that you addressed the compliance issue and the cost to our economy, because we'd really get a boost if we could just get rid of it.
I'd like to make some changes over there. I would.
Yeah. All right, we got 10 minutes to go. Cathy, what's our next question?
Okay, so we're going to go into our firing round here. We're going to go to Mike Koenig from Georgia, who wants to ask a question about 2024 and the presidential. Mike?
You there, Mike? All right, we'll come back to Mike.
Okay.
A question from Steve Huff in Florida about any opportunities on the reform front in Florida. Go ahead, Steve. Boy, we're just batting 1,000 here, Cathy.
Okay.
I had a problem.
Are you there, Steve? Okay, there's Steve.
Yeah, sorry about that. Hey, Andrew. I've dubbed you on Twitter as the James Brown of the electoral reform movement. I've seen you everywhere. You're doing podcasts and interviews it seems like almost daily. So thanks a lot for being with us today. My question is about a tweet you put out on December the 15th saying that you were having a lot of high quality meetings lately. It was kind of a teaser. So I'm wondering, is there anything that you can share with us about who you've been meeting with and what results there are from those meetings?
Oh, thank you, Steve. I appreciate the fact that you've seen that I've been trying to make the case in different environments. The tweet was, I believe, in reference to a meeting I had with other third parties, Serve America movement among them, and we all wanted to make common cause. We were all trying to figure out how we could work together. That's one thing I adore about this space, is that people aren't very territorial. We just all want to get the stuff done, which is one of the features of people who are just trying to do the right thing. So that there are hopefully some promising developments on the way in terms of us coordinating with Sam in different ways. That there is an exciting candidate who wants to run it under the Forward Party in a state for governor that we hopefully will be able to announce the next number of weeks. There are some significant philanthropist types who are looking at this as a vehicle to invest in. So those are some of the things that are coming up that I was referring to in that tweet. But I was genuinely just excited. I was like, oh, I just came out of a good meeting. I was like, oh, and that last week before the holidays, it seemed like everyone wanted to get good things done.
That's great to hear.
Okay, connected to what you're saying right now about that, Andrew, and the positiveness of their meetings, let's have Patrick Ortiz and also Jared Gosson, who have some questions about coalitional opportunities and working with other parties. So perhaps the two of you could each ask your question, then Andrew can continue to talk about those openings. So Patrick and Jared.
I'm here, but if Patrick wants to go first, he can.
No, go ahead, Jared.
I can
go
ahead. So my question was about in regards to just kind of lessons learned, Yang, in regards to the New York campaign. A lot of people were rooting for you, but some of the things that were done were a little concerning. So my question is kind of to the root of that is, are you going to go back to your instincts and working with volunteers, or do you have like strategy, people at a high level coming in with some of the strategies for the Forward Party?
Should I take that question? Or was there another question that was linked? I wasn't sure, Kathy.
I think we might have. Is Patrick there? Patrick Ortiz, or did we lose Patrick? Go ahead and answer, Andrew.
Sure thing. Hey, Jared. So the mayoral campaign and the presidential campaign had very, very different contexts, and I had a very different experience in each one. And so the presidential, I joke that the enemy was oblivion, where like if I stayed still for a moment, I would fall below a polling threshold and then disappear. So it was like run, to try and get people excited and energize folks in South Carolina, other parts of the country. And the media would try and ignore me, and then every once in a while they'd begrudgingly include me in something, but not as a contender, as like a bit of a novelty. And in the New York mayoral race, like I started out as either the front runner or one of the front runners, and then I just took pot shots every day, and had a relatively hostile relationship with the press. So it was like a very different context. And to your point about the nature of the teams, under the presidential, we just had like a group of very idealistic, relatively fresh to politics folks, and then the consultants came in when we raised a lot of money. In the New York mayoral, we started out with the consultants, and they ran the campaign, from early on. And I believe that was necessary because New York politics is a very, very specific domain. with like a whole bunch of intricacies and nooks and crannies. Now it turns out that that campaign did not win, and so you can easily second guess and say, hey, maybe like you should not have like had the professional team in from day one, because it turns out professionals are really good at some things and kind of like have blind spots in others.
Right.
And now objectively you would look at that and say, yeah, that's probably right. but the like the decision at the time, like I felt good about like the team in the beginning, and then when you have that team, then you just try and fight it out with that team. I'm still proud of a lot of the things we accomplished in the mayoral. We had more individual donors than anyone in the history of New York City politics, as one example.
All right, I want to ask Mike Eng and Doug Goodman from Nevada and Oregon. Both of them are involved in kind of early stage efforts to change the system there, and they both have questions. You guys both ask your questions. You got 15 seconds to ask Andrew a question, and then
Hi, Andrew.
Respond.
Hi, Andrew. Mike Eng here with Oregon Open Primaries. Oregon is a closed primary state, and so we're sponsoring a ballot initiative to clarify when the Oregon Constitution states that all elections shall be free and equal. It actually means that all registered voters and qualified candidates, regardless of party affiliation or non-affiliation, may participate in publicly funded primary elections to select the final candidates for a general election. But because of the unresponsiveness of our state democratically controlled legislature, a number of election reform measures are being pursued through ballot initiatives, including several platform positions of the Forward Party, such as independent redistricting, ranked choice voting, and nonpartisan primaries. We're curious about your state-by-state strategy for promoting the Forward Party and these specific platform issues. What are your thoughts on the most logical and strategic sequence for pursuing these election reform measures through ballot initiatives, which is restricted in Oregon to a single topic per initiative? For example, do you think securing open primaries is a logical prerequisite for achieving ranked choice voting, or vice versa? Thanks a lot.
And I don't remember submitting a question, so I'll just let Michael get his answer.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Doug. I thought you had a question, but go ahead, Andrew. You can respond to Mike.
Mike, would love to help you in Oregon. That is something of a one-party state, I believe, and you see that again. They don't like competition. If I had to make a choice, I do think open primaries would be the place to start. In part because it's popular, it's principled, it's hard to argue against, and I think it should be the first domino. And I'm not saying that just because this is an open primaries meeting, but the Forward Party would love to help, and we do have some volunteers in Oregon.
Thanks very much. We'll be in touch, I hope.
All right, Cathy, do we have time for one more question, or should we wrap it up here? Do you have a juicy one in the chamber?
I think we have to wrap it up, John. We have so many juicy ones still in the chamber.
But the hour is up.
It is up. And it's been just fabulous to have an hour with you, Andrew. And thank you so much for your time. And I was thinking back to one of the things that makes me optimistic right now is your work and the work of so many others in this space. And just all of what we're seeing of the persistence of people leaving the parties, looking for new ways, people seeing that structural reforms have to be implemented, that we have to find new ways to come together as Americans. This is something that we talk about every day at Independent Voting, and Jackie Salin and I are just constantly getting so many interesting phone calls from leaders all across the country. So this has been a very enriching hour and has given us all lots to build with and think about. And we wish you all the best, and happy birthday tomorrow.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you, Cathy. Thank you to everyone for being here. This is an uplifting and invigorating group. And please do get excited about some of these ballot initiatives, volunteer for open primaries, Forward Party, but this can be an enormous year for us if we just let people know what's possible. They're all looking around. We are the vanguard. So, we're going to grow like a weed this year.
I share your enthusiasm, Andrew, and it's great to have spent time with you, and look forward to building and causing a ruckus this year. So thank you again. Thank you, everybody, and have a great
Thank you,
day.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay
Bye,
safe,
everybody.
stay healthy.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.